Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson, and today we are joined by Julia Lupine, author of Under a Rock, an Electro Sensitivity Survival Guide. Julia is also a homesteader, goat trainer, herbalist, songwriter, and primitive skills enthusiast. In today's conversation, we are talking about how non-native electromagnetic fields can exacerbate autoimmunity and cause chronic illness. And we share steps that we can all take to reduce our exposure and allow our resilient bodies to heal. Julia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
I am so excited for this conversation. As I have already told you, this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm just thrilled to get to have this conversation with you today. So I would love to have you start by sharing a bit of your journey with listeners.
Yeah, for sure. Well, today I live in a remote area with no cell phone service, and I don't even have a cell phone at all. Haven't used one in many years. And I live on a farm and milk goats every day, and I'm in very, very good health. But things were not, but things were not always this way. So I'm originally from Fairfield County, Connecticut, and around the late 90s, early 2000s, cell towers started going up everywhere. And this was around the time I was in high school. And I never thought twice about it or thought that that could be a bad thing. My mom had one of the early cell phones. I didn't have one till after high school, but some of my friends did. And anyway, during high school, I went from a straight A student to a D student almost overnight because I could not concentrate all of a sudden. I had chronic fatigue and just extreme tiredness, depression, just kind of felt horrible about life. And I thought maybe this was normal and that teenagers were supposed to be depressed, but it was to the extreme. I couldn't even get out of bed in the morning to go to school or later on to work. I just felt horrible all the time. And except once in a while, it would flip and I would get so much energy that I couldn't focus. And I would just go for walks around the city for miles and not sleep for days. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And there was no, doctors told me I was bipolar, but
I was wondering.
Yeah. And it was and I would get really creative. So I loved these times, but it was also kind of insane because I couldn't focus. It was also hard to sit still in class when this was going on. So things were a rough ride for a few years. And after a while, I knew there was a correlation between diet and this because I had horrible sugar cravings and I'd feel awful when I gave in to them, but I would anyway. And then, and then I was addicted to caffeine, massively addictive to caffeine to balance it out. And, but so I started looking into more natural, healthier. We didn't have the word organic at the time, really.
Sure.
But I started eating a lot of fruits and vegetables and eventually figured out to give up gluten. And I got a lot healthier after that and could focus. And but there was still, and then over the years, I researched herbs and taught myself a lot about diet and tried out different things and improved in health. But there was always something wrong that I just could not pinpoint. And I'd get symptoms. I'd still have the chronic fatigue at times and joint pain and swelling. For a while, I thought I had Lyme disease, and I may have. I never had a definitive test.
From Connecticut, that's fair.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody gets it, and there's ticks everywhere. And so I had a lot of those symptoms. And other just mysterious things, low thyroid, all of these problems. But so that contributed to me dropping out of college 3 times.
Oh, goodness.
And after I walked out of the middle of class the last time, I decided to just teach myself what I wanted to know,
Smart.
save some money. And so I started, one of the things I wanted to learn was wilderness survival schools and nature stuff. So I started spending a lot of time in nature and sleeping outside and in remote areas. And I noticed I always felt better when I slept outside. And around 2011, I was living in the Moab, Utah area and living in caves and under rocks and different places in the desert just for fun and teaching myself about edible plants and had this notion of living off the land, and I noticed, and then I would come into town on weekends to hang out with friends. And immediately when I'd come into town, of course, I would turn on my cell phone because it didn't work out there.
Sure.
And I'd check the messages, and I started noticing a contrast between how I felt in the wild and how I felt in town. And I would get this burning pain right here when I talked on the cell phone.
In your head for people listening on audio.
Like just these sharp nerve pains and kind of stuff with my arms too, like this tingling, especially in the hand that held the cell phone. And I started noticing too in certain people's houses or places in town, like the grocery store or anywhere where there's Wi-Fi, and also going under those big power lines, I started feeling things. And I would rant about this to my friends, and they thought I was crazy.
Sure.
And so I started spending more and more time in the wilds. And this went on for years. And eventually, even in winter, I would be like living under a rock ledge in the desert and making campfires to stay warm. But over the years, the symptoms became more and more severe. And I really didn't want to go to town after a while. And people really started thinking I was nuts. And then so it eventually culminated, long story short, it eventually culminated in a health crisis where I had lost all this weight and was really having autoimmune symptoms and weird nerve pain and eye twitching and all this weird stuff with blood vessel problems, varicose veins, swelling joints. The headaches were the worst. And I still felt okay when I was not in town, but it became harder and harder to hike into town, hitchhike or walk into town every few days and load up the backpack with food and go back to the wild, especially since I couldn't really work because there was always I did freelance gardening for the most part, but there was always a smart meter or a power line. And of course I had to go through town to get there. I didn't have a car. I was walking and hitchhiking everywhere. So it became more and more difficult to survive. And I was malnourished and like dumpster diving for food, and picking fruit, only organic food, but picking fruit off trees too, and just doing the best I could, but things were getting more severe. So long story short, I found a friend with a farm in a remote area, and because I had this idea that raw goat milk might help because I was having digestive issues too. And so I found this place in a remote area where there was no cell service, and my friend was electrosensitive too, so she didn't have Wi-Fi, and my health started coming back pretty much immediately after moving here, and to this day, so now I'm pretty much symptom free. I have my own farm nearby in the same valley, and I'm out digging fence posts and milking goats and taking care of turkeys and doing, various, whatever I want to do, various farm chores. And still kind of trying to scrape by to survive because I can't get a job anywhere, but I make enough money doing odd jobs and selling cheese and different things to survive. Just recently dug a big hole in the ground, hired a backhoe to dig out the hole to put my underground house in.
Which, and again, is now at this point by choice, right? So now
Right.
it's like, okay, this is what works for me.
Yeah, making my own cave.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful that you're well and you're strong and you know what to do to stay well, which is amazing. And I'm sure listeners are thinking, okay, I can't go live on a farm and milk goats and be in the middle of nowhere,
Live under a rock.
Although it does sound, as we were saying before we hit record, it's one thing when it's by choice. There is an appeal for sure. So let's shift to, let's talk about a little bit. First of all, you're not crazy. You may have been an early adopter where, probably nobody around you had heard of this electromagnetic sensitivity, didn't know what EMFs were. There's still a lot of people who don't even believe it's real. So first of all, I want to just, for listeners that are like, is this really a thing? Is there any research coming out, any kind of scientific data that, can prove beyond, you don't need the proof, how you feel.
Right.
But I really do believe that this is such an important issue because, first of all, the amount of exposures is just, higher. We already have this explosion of chronic illness and autoimmunity. It's kind of hard we can't take cell service and Wi-Fi and all of that out of the equation. I think it's another toxin. When I talk about toxins is where this comes up in my practice. To me, it's another toxin, but it's also a toxin that, if somebody has mold and mycotoxins in their home, Wi-Fi makes those mycotoxins more active. So it's definitely compounding. But is there science?
There is. And you can actually just search under PubMed about the effects of electromagnetic radiation. And there's a multitude of studies. None of these studies are done by the telecommunications companies themselves. They do their own research, and their studies say that it's completely safe. But anyway, real unbiased studies, there's a lot of proof. There was a recent one, by the National Health Institute, I believe, that was a multi-year, like several $billion study on rats, and it proved that it does cause cancer in rats.
Sure.
And there's some other studies too.
And more. I think, this is very early on in the information, which is why I'm so excited about your book, because again, for so many people, it's not something they've ever even thought about at all. So for those of us that are either unable, unwilling, or just not living either really remotely or in a cave or under a rock, what can we do?
Right. Well, the first step would be stop using it as much as possible. Now, I know it's our main communication option in the modern age, but the landlines are still available. And the law of supply and demand, if more people stop using cell phones and start using landlines, then the demand of, then the companies will be more willing to install them. This is a landline here that I'm using. It doesn't give me heart palpitations, nausea, vomiting, seizures, migraines, and any of those things that Wi-Fi might do to me. I just can't even talk if I'm around it. And my friends notice there, and it's not a panic attack. It's just more like my mind, something, wires don't connect, like something goes blank,
right?
And it just can't even, articulate at all. But landline's totally fine. And that would be the first step. But before even going there, just start turning your Wi-Fi off at night and turn your cell phone off at night. If you can turn off the breaker to all of the electricity to your bedroom at night. Definitely turn off lights at night. Don't use those new fluorescent twirly lights. They put off EMFs and they're really bad for your sleep. And it's a really ugly, hideous kind of light too. But yeah, the main thing would be turn off Wi-Fi at night and see if your insomnia goes away and you start sleeping better. And if you notice those effects, then maybe start thinking about a landline.
I love that.
Another thing people can do if they're inspired, well, I would say get a meter. That's the one. And like people think about getting all these harmonizers and neutral, all this bliss ninny stuff that doesn't act new age woo woo crap.
And I want to get into that. Let's talk about meters, and then we can talk about because always when you see an opening in the market, right, you're going to get flooded with products that make claims. So
everyone wants to make a buck. So anyway, we'll get into that in a second. But instead of spending money on any of that stuff, the main expenditure when you're first suspecting you may be electrosensitive is invest a little money into a good meter. Like probably $100 to $150, you can get an entry level meter that'll serve you for years. I've used either a Safe and Sound or a Cornet are both good ones. There's a few others.
Okay.
And but I like these ones because they have red, yellow, and green lights to estimate what levels of exposure, the different levels of exposure. Some meters have a sound function too, and it converts the Wi-Fi to sound waveform and lets you know how it sounds like
strong.
Feedback. Yeah, it sounds like a nasty, screechy feedback on a microphone.
I would go for the lights personally.
Yeah, well, the sound.
But either way,
the sound you can let your friends listen to it, and sometimes that makes an impression.
Right. But and this is it serves a couple purposes. It helps you find, that there could be areas in the home that you have exposures that you're not expecting. And so I think that can be really helpful. And then there is that seeing is believing part, right? Like back to data. If we have data, then we can make a change. And so I love that so far, I'm like, yay, every step you've said is like, yes, these are, and I want to we'll talk about products. But we were talking before the show, and this is really, really important. And listeners, hopefully by now know me. They know I'm never doom and gloom. That's not the purpose of these conversations.
Right.
And so less is better, right? Like we don't need to go live in a cave if we're taking control and reducing. That can help improve our health, correct?
It can make such a big difference. And I mean, that would have been enough for me if it hadn't gotten
so far.
Yeah, because I still was getting exposures. One of my camps early on was under high voltage lines because I just didn't know any better. I also climbed a cell phone tower because I thought it would be a way to face my fears.
Story.
So, there's things that I hitchhiked across the country and just had major exposures during this.
But you didn't know, right? We always
I thought I was just crazy and I needed to just fight it and get over it with my mind because I'd never even heard the word electrosensitive.
Right.
I thought it was just me and that this dark force energy was attacking me and I needed to fight it off. But you really can't fight it off. But there's things that you can do. And especially early on in the game, if we start taking these steps, some of the symptoms can reverse and we can still have a normal life. But, maybe without streaming, streaming Twitter.
Right.
Twitter feed on your iPhone
Which
or whatever.
Which is probably healthier anyway for other reasons as well.
Exactly.
But I love, so let's talk about, because I do feel like there is a flood of products on the market, and I'm always looking for, what can I do that works? So first of all, is there anything, that you can use on your devices or in your home to shield ourselves for those of us, again, that are still going to, like I'm recording right now on my computer.
Right.
So are there things that do work for shielding?
There are. So natural fibers are best for for something to wear. The best thing you can do is different layers of natural materials. Linen's a really good one, cotton, wool, and then the best thing ever is leather, because you're literally getting a thicker skin. And you can test this with a meter, but it actually blocks out a significant amount of radiation. So when I go to town, I wear my cool leather coat, and I also have this leather aviator style helmet with like little wings on it that a local artist made. I get compliments on it all the time. I don't always tell people what it's for, but it looks a lot better than a tinfoil hat. And
it does. It's a little less obvious.
and so yeah, those metal lined beanies and clothing that people buy online, they generally don't work. There's some electrosensitives swear by them, but for the most part, it could even make it worse because metal conducts electricity. So, and mostly it's just an expensive waste of money, and they don't even look that good. So I don't recommend that. And then as far as shielding goes, same thing. Everyone wants to make a buck, and those metal and anything with metal has helped. I'm not going to say it doesn't work, but it hasn't worked well for me. And some electrosensitives that I know have adverse reactions to it. Because again, metal can conduct electricity and it can shield it. It's complicated. But what works better is same thing, natural materials. So, for example, my friend recently built a cabin with, she used cardboard for insulation because she wanted something that was toxic. And so she put many layers of cardboard between the pallets of the cabin that the cabin was built with. And she found that it was originally, there was 4 or 5 bars of service. And once she did this, like it went down to 1 bar of service.
Wow.
And so it has significant effects. And then she painted the walls with shungite. She mixed shungite, which does work, but not necessarily just as a bracelet or something you carry on you, because that wouldn't block the waves. But if it's in a paint, then it does have an effect. At least I've had good results with it. So mix a little bit of that in with a non-toxic clay paint such as BioShield. I've also mixed wood glue and sand. There's a recipe for it in my book. It was invented by this guy, Gary Duncan, who's a top EMF researcher. And he comes up with low-cost natural solutions. So this sand paint called Carlionite, it's sifted sand mixed with wood glue, or you could probably mix it with the paint as well for something more non-toxic, but I haven't done that yet. But you just make a do-it-yourself paint, and it makes your walls look like the walls of the cave. But I did it with my trailer, and it seems to help, although I'm in a low EMF area anyway.
Sure. I love that. Let's actually talk a little bit about the book. What can listeners expect from the book Under a Rock?
So it's a combination survival guide and with my personal story, and I tried to kind of alternate the chapters to make it more interesting.
Easy to read. Yeah.
Tips on herbalism and natural building, and I even talk about goats, and I have different types of electronic devices and what to do about them. And then I talk about the studies and research. And I also go into philosophy and, what we might want or not want in the future. So I talk about Elon Musk and his evil plan, and, some transhumanism stuff, and just some of the stuff that I don't want to see in the future.
Yeah.
But we take steps toward preventing that through our everyday choices, such as paying for a landline instead of cell phones.
Right. And it makes such a big impact. We talk about this, with food choices as well, right? Like if we are spending our dollars really thoughtfully, eventually the bad stuff's going to go away. If it's not making money, it's going to go away. People
have all these conspiracies about it, but the thing is, or conspiracy theories about evil plans of people trying to kill us. But the thing is, we're doing it to ourselves with our own choices every day. And if we stop demanding these technologies, then they would go away because no one would be paying for them.
Right. I love that. That's so it sounds like the book has everything, as far as, it's interesting, it's easy to read, and it also gives doable tips. I do want to touch on, because we started to mention it. There are a variety, you called them woo-woo, of different products. Some, things people can wear, things you can put in your home that are marketed to protect you from EMFs. At this point, for the most part, you feel like those things don't work.
For sure. But if people still want to try it out, what I would say is, first invest in a good EMF meter, and then get one of these gadgets and see if there's an effect. It's easy. And I know some of them say that they affect the scalar waves and all of that. And there conveniently isn't any way to test for that. But, you're like, 'cause like if something makes you feel better, then by all means use it, but don't use it as an excuse to still continue using Wi-Fi and check your Twitter on your iPhone. It's like common sense, people.
And I want to highlight, we were talking about shutting down, at the very least, shutting down Wi-Fi and cell phones at night, and maybe even flipping the breaker to your bedroom. I can't tell you how many times I have had, when I start with, so many people are sleeping with their cell phones on their night table next to their head. And just getting them, to turn it off and move it. And silenced is not off, everybody, by the way. It's not the same. Like most of the time when I first bring it up with new clients, they think I'm asking, are they getting phone calls in the middle of the night? I'm like, no, that's not even what I'm talking about. But it's kind of like making a diet change. So for people that are listening that are not aware that they have sensitivity, you will be surprised what you notice when you start to make some of these changes. It's like people but I've been eating gluten my whole life. And, so they're not aware it's a problem until they take it out and they feel better. And that's what I really want to encourage listeners to do, is to take some of the steps that you recommend, in this interview, and get the book and see. Again, I don't live in a cave. I also don't live, luckily, under wires. And this is something
that looks like a brick wall behind you, though.
It is.
So that's like a cave.
Yep. And I built this house 7 years ago, and they thought I was crazy. I love that you mentioned, the compact fluorescent bulbs. My electricians thought I was insane. When I said, I only want incandescent lights. Oh, we don't do that anymore. I'm like, do it. Yeah. Yes, we do. This is my house.
We do now. Things have changed.
And it's one of those things, but dollars matter. That's a perfect example. I feel like it's almost every year where they say they're going to stop selling incandescent lights. Right. And those of us that care run out and stock up. And what do you know? They don't stop selling incandescent lights. So
nice.
We really can, create the future we desire with our dollars if we're thoughtful. But I can't encourage people enough. Just because you can't feel it doesn't mean it's not impacting you. Right. And I think of inflammation as cumulative. Not that I think of it, it is cumulative chronic inflammation. And this is a factor, whether you're aware of it or not. So
it affects everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, like the bees went away after a new 4G tower moved to this valley here.
Oh, that's sad.
They've got antennas.
They know.
It's affecting all life on Earth. And whether or not people are aware of it, I mean, I thought it was pretty crazy when I hadn't even heard of it, but I was sick all the time, and now I'm not. So, when I go back into town, I feel immediately everything comes back.
Wow.
If I turned on that fridge over there, because I'm at a friend's house right now with the power turned off, but if I turned on that fridge over there, immediately everything would come back too. And I'd probably get a migraine that would last the night. And I'm not saying this as a negative thing. It cause and effect. what happens.
Well, and so is there a connection between, chemical sensitivity and, you know, electromagnetic
Yeah,
sensitivity?
yes, definitely. There's a direct correlation, and all electrosensitives are also chemical sensitive. Um, and the two, yeah, there's a definite overlap. And so a vital thing to do if you're electrosensitive is, or even if you're not, go 100% organic.
Yeah. And I love that,
And
again,
99% organic is not the same as 100%. 100% and my symptoms go away. Occasionally,
which is
I've eaten
amazing.
something the past couple of years that I didn't know was not organic because I
Right.
didn't read the label close enough, and I started getting nerve pain and stomach aches and some brain fog, and then realized that what I was doing and stopped, and the problem went away.
Again, because it's all different kinds of toxins, and those are cumulative. And so, I love that you're touching on, like, we need to be, it's what we're eating, what we're using, and what we're near. All the things
Sure.
really matter. And that's where every step you take does count. So I love that you shared with listeners. It's not just, you aren't really, the crazy lady in the tinfoil hat. Like, this is real, and it's whole lifestyle. That's why I see so many people that are, they're just eating well, or they're picking one lifestyle area and they're focusing on
Right.
that, and they're not getting the results that they want.
Yeah,
And this is
it's full
exactly why.
spectrum. You need to do everything. Also, it sounds cliche, but positive mental attitude is the most important thing. You have to have a survivor's attitude when you're living in a cave and everybody thinks you're crazy and you can't even afford food. Like, you have to not accept defeat as an answer, not feel sorry for yourself either. Just live day to day, and probably everything will be okay.
Well, and I love that, and that's exactly why we're here having the conversation, right? Because it can be really difficult when you're really sick, especially, oh, see, puppies agree, especially when, that you don't know why. And sometimes, usually, even sometimes, doctors, oh, your labs are fine. It must be in your
Right.
head. And so that positive attitude, that's why we're here having this conversation, to give hope and really let people know, the body can heal. Look at how resilient the body is. You were so sick, and
Right.
now you know how to be well.
Yeah, now I'm totally fine.
I
And
love it.
before, I was like 106 pounds and like
Oh,
had a non-functioning gallbladder and systemic candida. Like, this was all diagnosed by doctors, and they said that I was, in pretty rough shape. And now, years later, totally fine.
yeah.
So,
So we can heal no matter
yeah,
what. It's never,
the body's resilient and wants to fix itself. You just have to give it the
yes.
tools that it needs.
Yeah, I love that. I love your message. I love your information. What is one step that listeners can take today? You already gave us a bunch of them, so you can repeat or say something new. But if listeners were to take one action starting today to improve their health, what would you recommend?
Well, I would say buy an EMF meter and start minimizing exposure.
I love it. Hopefully there'll be a big rush on sales for EMF meters.
Yeah, and buy my book too.
Yes, definitely get the book. It is a fun. You make it fun. So thank you for making it fun.
Being part of a secret club. Very special people.
Well, and
also the book. I'm going to also say the book, The Invisible Rainbow by Arthur Furstenberg, is really explains the science of it.
Awesome. I'm going to check that one out as well. Just such really good information. And again, I just am grateful to have the conversation, and I'm guessing that this is totally new to a lot of listeners. So I thank you for not only sharing your journey and your resilient story, but just the information of, some of us wouldn't mind going and living in a cave. But just the
But
things
we shouldn't have to.
right. And so the things that we can do, I always say it's never too late to heal and it's never too early to prevent. So I encourage everybody to take some steps. So you live in a cave. So where do listeners find you?
Well, I recently just joined Facebook.
Oh,
I
no
know,
way.
but mostly just to promote the book, and I'm having fun with it. Electrosensitive people are reaching out to me all the time and asking advice and sharing stories. So yeah, Julia Lupine Facebook, and also and then my book is on Amazon because they have they're
it's great.
so yeah, if you link to that, it'll help people find it.
Absolutely.
Oh,
All of that is
leaving me a review really helps sales, by the way.
there you go, guys. So check it out, order it on Amazon and leave a review. But I was shocked. I love that you're also on Facebook because again, I'm somebody who would love to go live in the middle of nowhere. But then I wouldn't be able to help people like
well,
I do.
I went years without even being able to send an email hardly at all. I still write written letters, by the way, too.
Which is beautiful.
And I couldn't go online hardly at all. But now I have this landline. So I decided to start branching out and trying new things.
Well, I love it. Julia, thank you so much. You have shared amazing information with us today.
Okay, well, thank you.
For everyone listening, remember you can get the show notes and transcripts and all those links by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.